So why do we want to train hundreds, maybe thousands of trainers to train maybe millions of fathers across the world? Because the big problem of fatherlessness is a massive problem in this world, to such an extent that we believe that this is the biggest flaw in society. You would never be a great trainer unless a compelling urge to train and impact and change people would take hold of yourself. So let me tell you how this happened with me. 2002, I was called to do leadership training in a refugee camp, Nyarangusu, in Tanzania. It was about leadership, so I had about 4 days of training, and we packed in the schedule quite tightly, so that at the end of the schedule, we had about just 1 hour that we could spend before we had to leave. And I asked myself the question, was I there to train others, or was I there maybe to be taught by God himself? And for that reason, I asked people to call me some of the leaders of the refugee camp to come and just share their stories with me. I never knew that the story of the first person will change my life forever. He was a very respectable person, and as he walked into the room, I could sense that he was a leader. Anywhere, he would be considered to be a leader. As he sat down and started to tell his story, I was dumbstruck, because this was more or less the story that he told me. He was a pastor of a small little village, and he said to me, the leader of the village. There were not many people. But then suddenly one day, totally unexpectedly, the rebel forces moved into this village. Rebel forces with machetes. These are long, sharpened blades and machine guns. And they moved into the village and they rounded them up and they made them stand in a long line from the youngest to the oldest person. He was standing on this side of the line, and on that side of the line, there was a 6-year-old boy. And then they took the 6-year-old boy and they took the machete and they just literally chopped off his hand and then his arm. And then what they call short sleeve, and then the other arm, and they chopped it up, and then the legs, one by one, and then they took the body, and they chopped up the body. As he was telling the story, I was sitting back in my chair. I couldn't believe what I heard. This is not reading something in a newspaper. This is hearing something directly from a person that experienced the whole thing. But what really impacted me is when he bent forward, and he looked into my eyes, and he literally looked into my soul, and he said to me, if that was an unnamed boy, it would have been okay. But that was my own grandson. That statement ripped everything apart inside of me. I'm not an emotional person. I'm a phlegmatic person, generally speaking. But that just shattered every emotion I ever had. That was my own grandson. He continued to tell the story how they killed the other people down the line. They came to a pregnant lady. They took her. They cut open her stomach with a machete. They took out the baby. They chopped up the baby. And then he bent forward again and he said, and that was my own daughter. There were 10 left in the line. They started to run. The guys took the machine guns. They opened the machine guns. 5 got away. And he was one of the lucky 5 to get away. And he said to me, that is why I am now in this refugee camp. I couldn't believe his story. I said to the others, take him out, bring the other people. I thought this may be the exception. I needed to hear other stories. They brought the second person in, same story, different village. Third, same. Maybe 5, maybe 7 interviews, same story, different villages. And then I just sat back when they were all outside the room and I cried to God. And I said to God, God, I am a trainer of leaders. At that stage, I've already trained about leaders from about 50 nations of Africa. I'm a trainer of leaders in Africa. God, what is the problem with Africa? I demand. I'd never used the word demand with God. I hope I will never again use the word demand with God, because you don't demand anything from God. But I was so frustrated. I shouted and cried and I said, God, I demand an answer. What is the problem with Africa? And how are we going to solve this problem of Africa? And then that clear, still voice of the Holy Spirit, look up, look left. I did that. There was one little window there. And outside this mud hut where I was sitting, there were about 300 boys, about 6 years old, with soccer balls. Every 30th boy would have a soccer ball under his arm. Not a soccer ball that you can buy, one that you make from plastic bags. They would have it around under their arms. And then I would look at that. And then God said to me, listen carefully, and I'll tell you the problem. the problem of Africa is not poverty. The problem, main problem in Africa is not even HIV/AIDS. The main problem in Africa is fatherlessness. And unless you address that problem, none of the other problems would really be solved. Fatherlessness is the biggest problem in Africa. How are we going to address this, God? And then the clear instruction. You change the youth into the future fathers. And how you do this, you coach their coaches to become fathers for these children here that are fatherless. And therefore, and you do this through soccer. And therefore I had to get involved in soccer. I never knew anything about soccer. So I said to God, why do you pick on me? I know nothing about soccer. I'm a white guy, Africa, black. I'm old. And talk to the young people, Lord. And then he did something that I also will never forget. He grabbed me by my chest, and it was as if he would hit my chest like this. And he said, do you want to change Africa on your agenda or my agenda? I had to surrender. I had to give up. All my plans, all my ideas, all my thinking about a future in Africa and what I would do in Africa. And I had to adopt God's plan and obey his instructions, which I did. We created a program for soccer coaches called Ubabalo, the mercy of God for Africa, Ubabalo Africa. We did this for a number of years, and then God said to us, you see, you are now into the issue of Africa, into the problem of Africa, but I want to show you the depth of the problem. And that he did in one training I did for master trainers of Ubabalo. And God showed me how Satan has captured the fathers of the world, and how fatherlessness is the game of Satan. It's the strongest game he plays. And if we ever would shatter Satan under our feet, we will have to address the issue of fatherlessness by training fathers how to be fathers. So, I don't know. I don't know if you are sincere about this. I don't know if you want to embark on this issue of training people, fathers, to become real fathers. I went to the Bible and discovered that God is very sincere on this issue. The very last verse in the Old Testament says, and he will bring, referring to John the Baptist that would come as a prophet, and he would bring the fathers back to the children, and the children to the fathers. Otherwise, I will curse your land. That same instruction was given to John the Baptist. And that's why we read in Luke chapter 1, verse 17, two things that John the Baptist had to do to prepare the way for Jesus. Number one, he had to bring the fathers back to the children. Secondly, he had to bring the unrighteous back to the wisdom of the righteous. That is, bringing back good moral values. And those two things would prepare the way for Jesus. So my question to you, my friend, is, how sincere are you to deal with this problem? If you do not have a compelling reason for entering into trying to change this world by training fathers to be the real fathers as God instructed us, you would never continue on this journey. We need people that will persevere and will be determined to change a fatherless world into a world that has adopted the principles of God the Father for a restored society. I really invite you to join us on this journey.